Hey guys, it's mGalaxy and welcome to the camera comparison between the Apple iPhone 11 and the brand new Apple iPhone 12. Without further ado, let's start with the first picture of this highway. I can definitely say that I enjoy colors from both phones. New iPhones seem to provide an overall good balance between vibrance and neutrality most of the time. And the scene came out looking even better with the ultra-wide-angle module. Both look basically the same, apart from that the iPhone 12's picture has a bit higher contrast. This is actually one of my favorite shots, and it truly shows you how similar both phones are. Maybe the 12's picture is a bit brighter and the blue tone of the sky is a tad different, but really I feel stupid talking about that because honestly, just look for yourself, they look pretty much the same. Though there are some differences. Apple said they made some changes to the Smart HDR and I can definitely notice that. Just look at the ground area. The new iPhone seems to emphasize small differences in the color tones, and thanks to that some of the details are often more easily visible and a bit more exposed. However, I have also noticed the lens flaring is a bit more disturbing compared to the iPhone 11, but maybe that's just an angle of this shot. Once again, small details like those leaves all over the road are more highlighted by the iPhone 12. Well, it doesn't actually make the picture look objectively better in my opinion. I think it's just a matter of preference, and at first I actually preferred the iPhone 11's shot. I am thinking it came out a bit more natural. The same difference in the ultra-wide mode, both look great and crispy with a nice balance in colors, despite the lighting was already starting to get a bit worse at this moment. Both the 11 and 12 don't really disappoint when it comes to the camera. In this picture we have some differences in the color of this pile of stones, and I'm not 100% sure which one was more accurate. I guess the iPhone 11 was a bit more natural. The new phone slightly reminds me of the brave changes made to the HDR mode with the introduction of the iPhone 7 in 2016. Back then I thought the pictures it made often looked too artificial. Of course, that doesn't mean that I think the same about the iPhone 12. The difference is not always present and rather small, but definitely just worth to discuss. And one more time I have to complain about the lens flare being bigger and worse looking on the new phone. In fact, Apple made some significant changes to the lens this year, so maybe my suspicions are kind of justified. So as you saw, the changes made to the HDR mode are very subtle and most of the time both phones perform pretty much the same. Now let me show you some of the macro shots I've taken. And unsurprisingly, both look the same here, great balance in colors and well-tuned HDR. I believe that Apple also made some changes to the AI because sometimes the colors look a bit different with the new phone. As you can see in this sample shot of the flower, the tone of the violet varies between the two slightly. But more often there is not much of a difference and the overall color science still remains the same, which I have nothing against for really, because like I said, the iPhone provides with a solid and natural looking image. That said, both have slight boost in saturation, though it is made with a good taste in my opinion. Just take a look at how nicely both capture this autumn scene in silent lighting. And going into the crop, I am not able to see any difference related to the sharpness. Going further, looking at this picture of the CPU and zooming in, I have the same impressions, the level of detail and sharpness is basically the same. So this one will be my last to prove that there are no upgrades in sharpness or level of detail whatsoever. The texture of the sponge is fairly detailed on both and the sharpening is done subtly, just like you would expect from the iPhone. Moving to the videos, it's worth mentioning the introduction of Dolby Vision Hdr with the new iPhone. Although I've chosen to not elaborate on this topic because it is a standard with many various formats and quirks that is not widely used and supported yet. So both provide the same fantastic dynamic range, just take a look at how well they can handle the sun in front of them. Maybe changes in exposure were a bit faster on the 12, but that said, I haven't researched that further. The iPhone's color science is also just hard to beat and really thought out in my opinion. Another thing to prize is the balance between sharpening and natural level of detail, which once again is equally and exceptionally well served by both devices. I hope this mechanical watch footage demonstrates that pretty accurately. Nothing really changed when it comes to the stabilization either, both are equally good. But there are two things I don't like with the video quality of both. The first one being artifacts and noise, related probably to some bitrate issues. Secondly, weird light flickering when moving, which I think is connected with the electronic stabilization. However, every small sensor camera will have some flaws in this regard. I am just trying to tell you about the overlooked things. I still think the iPhone is overall one of the best, if not the best smartphone camera for videography. This year Apple also made some changes to the main camera lens, which now has f1.6 aperture instead of f1.8 found on the iPhone 11. In theory it should mean a bit better low light performance, but let's see that in practice. Starting with the first picture of this quadral set of speakers, unsurprisingly there is no night and day difference between the two. Limiting the amount of light a bit more and going into the crop, I am starting to see a bit less noise coming from the new iPhone, though it is still very hard to tell really. In this shot I can see the difference a bit more clearly, but again mostly at magnification. That said, you have to give it to the iPhone 12, it is just better. Is the difference really worth an upgrade? I would say no, and I think you would agree with me, but I am glad new phones deals with the noise a bit better, because improvements are always welcome. Moving to even worse lighting conditions, I think the 12th picture is a tad brighter, especially looking at the tree on the left. On the other hand, lens flare again seems to be more apparent. The other change in comparison to iPhone 11 is that the new phone can now use night mode in the ultra-wide angle mode. And as you can see, this makes quite a difference. Although I don't see myself using ultra-wide angle at night very often. Again, I can't stress how similar they are, but also what a great shot. I think night mode is one of the best inventions ever made to the smartphone camera. In this one, notice the color difference. The iPhone 11 came out a bit too greenish in comparison with the new phone. I would say the iPhone 12 is generally more accurate, this time with less of that orange tint to the whole image. And this shot was made almost in complete darkness, so don't be surprised with those levels of noise or artifacts. I am truly impressed by the results, because at the time of taking this picture I couldn't see anything for myself. And unsurprisingly, both perform very closely. I actually think the iPhone 11 was a bit sharper here, but that's probably because it weighs more, so it's easier to hold more steadily. The low-light video looks to be about the same. Going into the details, maybe the iPhone 12's footage is a tad brighter and has a little less aggressive noise reduction. I can also see small advantage in the color accuracy. The whole video is definitely not as yellowish as the iPhone 11. In conclusion, objective camera improvements of the new iPhone are basically limited to like two things. Firstly, the introduction of night mode to the ultra-wide angle module. Secondly, very minor tweaks in the low-light performance. We can also notice changes made to the Smart HDR, but as I showed you, those are rather small and more based on the personal preference in my opinion. Lastly, it seems to me there is one downgrade that needs further investigation: lens flaring. It appears to be bigger and worse looking with the newer phone. Of course, that's not that big of a deal, but I found it worth mentioning. Let me know what do you think about the differences between the two in the comments. If you like this comparison, consider subscribing and watching my other videos. See you in the next one. Peace!